All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story, blessing Awodibu. I actually wasn't going to make a video today, but I couldn't leave you guys hanging. I saw all you guys tagging me in this update, and I decided I had to make a video today with all this stuff to talk about. So, the first story, blessing Awodibu. The recent physique update that Blessing posted, supposedly, according to his caption, 6 days out from his pro debut at the Indy Pro. So he's doing the Indy Pro, and then the New York Pro, and the New York show is going to be where he shows down against Nick Walker. So a couple of things right off the bat. He gives this physique update showing his back. He's hitting a back lat spread here. And the first thing that I notice, obviously, is Blessing's back is insane. His upper back is extremely impressive, extremely wide, a lot of density, a lot of detail. I don't think any of Blessing's competitors, even Nick Walker, would argue that Blessing's upper back is phenomenal. I don't think any of them would argue that. I think it's pretty obvious that Blessing has a very dominant upper back. The second thing that I notice, how small Blessing's waist looks, very impressive. A lot of that is to do with the crazy width of his back, adding to that V-taper, adding to that illusion. But his waist looks incredibly small here, which I think is another big positive point for Blessing's physique. Now, let's get to the big point of contention here, the lower body. Now, I'm going to give my honest opinion here. I'm not going to pull any punches. This is honestly my opinion. I think the lower body is going to be an issue for Blessing. I like Blessing a lot. He's a nice guy. We're both sponsored by Redcon. His upper body, I think, is phenomenal. That being said, looking at this physique update, if it is recent, I think the lower body is going to be an issue for a number of reasons. Number one, my honest opinion, his lower body looks a little bit undersized compared to his upper body. Proportionally, they don't match up. He has a crazy upper body, crazy developed, crazy mass. I don't think his legs match that. That's the first thing. The second thing that I notice is this update is supposed to be 6 days out. At 6 days out, I don't see very much separation or detail at all in the glutes or in the hamstrings. I don't see any glute striations, and I really don't see very many lines at all in the hamstrings. If you're looking at his hamstrings, the back of his leg, do you guys see the striations in the hamstrings? I really honestly don't. So that's my honest opinion. I think the lower body is going to be an issue from the standpoint of size and from both the standpoint of the actual detail and separation. And this was one of the big criticisms that Ian Vier had of Blessing. He said, where's the sweep? When talking about the front of Blessing's legs, referring to the sweep in his quads. Now, we haven't really seen anything recent front-facing of Blessing's quads, so I can't comment really accurately on his quads. However, if this video is really 6 days out, I honestly think the lower body is going to be an issue for Blessing. Now, to what extent? I guess we'll see. The Indy Pro is a different monster than the New York Pro. The Indy Pro is kind of unique. You got a lot of very different physiques in that lineup, a very diverse lineup in terms of you've got very different structures. You got some mass monsters, you got some smaller guys, you got some more aesthetic guys. To me, there's really no crazy front runner right now at the Indy Pro. Now, New York, we'll talk about that later in the video. I think Blessing might get outclassed at the New York Pro by some of those guys. But the Indy Pro, keep in mind, that's his pro debut, his first ever pro show. I think he still stands a chance of doing pretty well at the Indy Pro. Now, keep in mind, pro debut, first show ever as a pro. Now, granted, because he's thrown his name into this conversation with these rivalries and with these beefs, he's kind of invited some higher expectations for himself. The bar is set pretty high for Blessing because of the talk that he's been talking. He's been talking a big game. So he's inviting a pretty high standard for how he's going to look at his pro debut. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on Blessing and a lot of scrutiny if he doesn't look good. But again, I think Blessing did invite a lot of that. So I don't mean any of this is negativity, but if Blessing doesn't do well, I think it should be taken with a grain of salt because it's still his pro debut. He's got all this attention because of his social media following. He's got all this attention because he's been talking crap with these guys back and forth, these rivalries. But at the end of the day, it's still his pro debut. It's not the end of the world if Blessing does not win the Indy Pro. His first pro show ever. A lot of guys don't win their pro debuts and go on to have fantastic careers in the IFBB. So even if Blessing doesn't win this Indy show, that doesn't mean he's not going to be a phenomenal pro in the future. So if you guys want my honest opinion, I honestly think the lower body is going to be an issue. but I still think it's not out of the cards for Blessing to win the Indy Pro. Now, the New York Pro is what I want to talk about next, after a word from our sponsors at Labrada Nutrition. All right, so now next up in the news, Hassan Mustafa, who I think is one of the front runners undoubtedly for the New York Pro. I think Hassan is kind of ahead of the pack there, and he posted this physique update at 2 weeks out from the New York Pro, saying he weighs 269 pounds fresh out of bed, extremely depleted and flat, and he says it's time to carb up. Now, from a muscle mass standpoint, from a development standpoint, from a density standpoint, I think Hassan is leading the pack. The roundness, the fullness, even when he says he's flat in this picture, look at the size of his quads, look at the roundness of his delts, look at the roundness of his arms. Hassan is a very dangerous, very complete, very dense bodybuilder, and I think he's going to be leading the pack in New York. My prediction right now for the New York Pro, based on everything we know about the lineup, all the physique updates that we've seen thus far, I think Hassan and Nick Walker have very similar physiques, very similar strong points, and I think the battle of New York is not going to be between Nick and Blessing. I think the battle is going to be between Hassan and Nick for 1 and 2. I think those are the two front runners based on everything that I've seen so far. Those are the two guys where I've seen their physique updates. The only two guys that I've seen the updates, and I was like, wow, these guys are ahead of the pack. These guys are the front runners. And based on the physiques, I think Hassan might have the more impressive physique than Nick. But based on what I've seen from Nick so far, I think Nick's conditioning might actually be ahead of Hassan. So that's why I think it's going to be a battle. While I think Hassan is more developed than Nick, I think if Nick is in better shape, it's going to be an extremely close competition between Hassan and Nick. So, like I said, based on everything we've seen so far, my prediction at this point is the New York Pro is going to be a battle between Hassan and Nick for 1 and 2, and maybe Justin Rodriguez in that mix as well. But I think Hassan and Nick are in a little bit of a different category than Blessing. They've got very different physiques than what Blessing has. And look at the lower body on Hassan. Nick too, but look at Hassan's quads. You're going to see his quads next to Blessing's, and it's going to be two different classes. I don't mean that any disrespect to Blessing, but Hassan has some insanely crazy quads. And if you're someone that has maybe underdeveloped or lacking quads, even just a little bit on a pro stage, when you get next to someone like Hassan that has crazy overdeveloped quads, that's going to expose that weakness on stage, and that's going to give Hassan the edge over you. Now, next up in the news, the latest physique update from Hunter Labrada at 12 weeks out from the Chicago Pro. Looking very impressive. I'm really excited to see what Hunter looks like on stage. The fact that he's still got 3 months to prepare for this show, 12 weeks, and he's already looking like he's in really dangerous shape, I think is going to be a kind of hallmark of things to come. And I think Chicago is going to be a real proving ground for Hunter. He had a really successful first Olympia. Top 10 at his first Olympia ever is a very impressive accomplishment. But this Chicago Pro, there's going to be a lot of very talented bodybuilders there. Akim Williams, Sergio Oliva Jr., you've got Charles Griffin, Hunter Labrada. This show is going to be a really, really stacked lineup. And if Hunter is able to win that show, I think that really solidifies his momentum going into this year's Olympia, especially if that's the show that he gets his qualification at. I think that would be really impressive, and that would be a lot of momentum going into the O. And based on what we're seeing so far from Hunter, the guy is dialed in. 12 weeks out looking like this, I think is very impressive. We know he's got the size to hang with these other pros. We know he's able to bring crazy conditioning, and it looks like this show is going to be no exception. It looks to me like the conditioning is already, I mean, he looks phenomenal for 12 weeks out. And Hunter has just continued to impress me, and I'm sure he's going to continue to impress at the Chicago Pro. Now, the final story that I have for you guys today, the most recent physique update from Akim Williams. He posted a very impressive update the other day, and now we have another recent update from Akim, again looking incredibly impressive. I'm really starting to get the impression that Akim might be preparing for a show sooner than Chicago, which would be cool. I would love to see Akim on stage again. Again, a top 6 Olympian in 2020, one of the most improved bodybuilders of that year, one of the most impressive bodybuilders of that year, and a guy that I'm really excited to see on stage again because I think he's going to continue to impress as well. Really nailed that conditioning at the Olympia, and if he continues to be able to do that, I think he's going to go on to have a tremendously impressive next couple of years as far as Olympia performances and top-tier showings as a pro. So that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Again, I wasn't going to make a video today, so if you did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up. Let me know. Comment in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet already. As always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.